Tonight, a judge stops a publication ban in the bail hearing for Narissa and Odelia Cusance.
Poste de police est plus conforme.
Plus, basic infrastructure problems in some northern communities is obstructing police work.
Who are you wearing tonight?
I'm wearing Leslie Hampton.
And Indigenous Fashion Week takes off in Vancouver. Good evening, Tanse, and welcome to APTN National News. I'm Daryl Stranger. A judge in Yorkton, Saskatchewan has said no to the province's request to ban media from reporting on details of a bail hearing for two Saulteaux sisters. Narissa and Odelia Cusance of the Kiskous First Nation want to be free on bail while the federal justice minister reviews the case as a possible miscarriage of justice. They've been in prison since 1994 for a murder they say they didn't commit. Their cousin has confessed to the murder. The province of Saskatchewan wanted to keep the details of their bail hearing from the public, but their story has already been told in detail by APTN and some other media outlets. In his 29-page decision, the judge said attempting to ban coverage of the bail hearing is, quote, akin to closing the barn door after the horse escaped. Now, the bail hearing is set for January in Yorkton. Media outlets can once again name Dawn Walker, a 48-year-old Saskatchewan woman accused of kidnapping a child and fleeing to the United States. A Saskatoon provincial court judge clarified that the media can report Dawn Walker's name, but not information that could identify two minors in this case. Walker was originally arrested in Oregon in August after allegedly using false identification to cross the border. Saskatoon police have charged her with parental abduction in contravention of a custody order and public mischief. Earlier this month, additional charges were added, including forging a passport, providing a false statement in relation to a passport, possession of a forged passport, possession of forged documents, identity theft, and identity fraud. At a press conference in Ottawa today, the New Democratic Party said corporate greed has led to the high cost of living in the north, and they want the federal government to do something about it. NDP MPs Nikki Ashton and Laurie Edlout compared the prices in the north to those in Ottawa. For example, a can of tuna costs almost 3 times more in the north. Due to inflation, the NDP say housing, food, and fuel prices in the north are becoming unaffordable, and that the grocery chain Northmart earned almost $160 million in net profits last year. Idlout said the Nutrition North program, which subsidizes food to keep prices low, is not working and needs reform.
So the program that this Nutrition North program needs to do better to make sure that it's going directly to people rather than to the for-profit corporations who are subsidized to keep making profits off the hands of Nunavummiut and Northerners. So I would love to see it more focused on supporting the hunters and trappers associations that exist in the communities.
We want to hear what you think about some of the stories you've seen so far tonight. Here's how to continue the conversation. You can send your emails to news@aptn.ca, or you can leave a comment on aptnnews.ca. You can also find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok. Follow APTN News to join the conversation and see our latest stories. 4 humpback whales have been found dead on the BC coast in about a month. Researchers are concerned because the death total is closer to what they would usually see in a year in the province. APTN's Lee Wilson has more.
That whale was found dead, washing up on Malcolm Island and Vancouver Island. Researchers suspect the whale died of blunt force trauma, possibly from a boat strike. 3 more whales were found on the north coast of British Columbia, including a whale found on a provincial park beach on Haida Gwaii last week. Shanti Thurber is a researcher who works on Haida Gwaii. She says it's unusual to see the amount of deaths of humpbacks in a short period.
Unfortunately, we have strong indication that at least 2 of these deaths have been caused by vessel or ship strike. And then the other ones we haven't confirmed yet. But it's highly unusual to be, well, within such a concentrated amount of time, it's highly unusual to see this number of deaths. And typically in a year, we'll see about 5 to 10 humpback deaths.
The North Pacific humpback whale populations were once listed as a species at risk nearly 2 decades ago. Thurber says they've made a steady increase in numbers since, adding that humpback whale deaths are possibly higher because whales normally sink when they die. She says the concentration of deaths on the north coast of BC may be due to humpbacks staying around longer for food or increased vessel traffic. People on the water being aware of the whales can help prevent future deaths.
As a boater or as a recreational user or as a commercial fishery, just being aware of these whales sticking around for longer and a larger number of these whales being present.
Lee Wilson, APTN National News, Kitimat.
All right, it's time to step aside for a short break, but still ahead, a tour of Wanatikimak Police Station and what's causing issues around it.
À l'extérieur, parce que j'ai déjà une grosse approche aussi au niveau de la communauté.
Welcome back. In Nunavut, a decision by the Alberta government regarding the Arctic Winter Games is having an effect on athletes in all 3 territories and beyond. Our Kent Driscoll is in Iqaluit.
Thanks. I'm here at the Arctic Winter Games Arena in Iqaluit because Alberta's Premier, Danielle Smith, is spotlighting the Arctic Winter Games as an example over COVID restrictions. At a news conference this week, Premier Smith was urging Alberta organizations to drop their COVID vaccine mandates. Her example was the Arctic Winter Games. Smith said the Arctic Winter Games wanted $1.2 million from us to support their effort, and they were discriminating against the athletes, telling them they had to be vaccinated. So we asked them if they would reconsider their vaccination policy in the light of new evidence, and they did. Now, the Arctic Winter Games did drop the vaccine requirements on November 18th, but the president of the Games Committee, he said in published reports that it wasn't to do with the funding, that they were just following current health advice. Now, we tried to reach the committee president, but he was traveling and we weren't able to hook up with him. The Arctic Winter Games are a big deal in the North. Since 1970, the Games have happened 15 times and now happen every 2 years. It's a mix of Arctic sports and more general sports. You'll see everything from dog sledding to hockey at the same event. All 3 Canadian territories, Northern Alberta and Nunavut, round out the Canadian teams. The rest are international, Alaska, Greenland, and Russia, to name a few. For the Arctic, this is a premier event. The Games were supposed to happen in 2020, but were cancelled due to COVID-19 restrictions. This is Team Nunavut unveiling their uniforms just days before the Games were called off. Some of those athletes had been waiting until now for their chance at Arctic Winter Games gold. While the Games may be vaccine optional, it seems unlikely the decision will change the vaccination rate among the athletes. I spoke with officials from all 3 territorial teams. All 3 dropped their vaccine mandate for athletes when the host committee did. But the thing is, all of the tryouts, all of the pre-game competition, all of the training, you needed to be vaccinated to participate in those. Essentially, to make an Arctic Winter Games team, you needed to be vaccinated against COVID-19, and those needles will not wear off before the Arctic Winter Games. So Smith may have made her point, but the vaccines had already been taken. Back to you in Winnipeg.
All right, thanks, Kent. Many Indigenous police forces across the country have been sounding the alarm for years now. They say underfunding leads to major infrastructure and staffing issues. APTN's Shushan Bécon was recently given a tour of the Atikamekw community of Wemotashi's police station to see what's going on firsthand. The story was translated by Tom Fenerio and narrated by Amelia Fournier.
Le poste de police est plus conforme
Robert Petitquet is the Public Safety Director for Wemotaci First Nation. He says the state of the community's police station impedes his officers from doing their jobs. For instance, it does not have an interrogation room or a private space for people accused of crimes to meet with their lawyers. At least a solution is coming. A new station has been built and they'll be moving there in February. But there are other pressing concerns here.
Oui, il y a un gros problème. Comme c'était moi-ci, j'ai deux départs, j'ai deux policiers qui quittent pour la Sûreté du Québec.
OK.
J'en ai un qui va aller en entrevue pour une autre communauté, là.
Petitquet says Wemotaci needs at a minimum 8 patrolmen and 2 investigators. Otherwise, the quality of policing suffers.
Et ça demande plus aux policiers sur le terrain parce que quand ils finissent un chiffre de 12, il faut qu'ils restent disponibles pour la personne de jour qui va être tout seul ou vice-versa.
Gabriel Hébert has been patrolling the streets of Wemotaci for several years. He says that sometimes the team is understaffed by as many as 4 officers. Hébert adds officers often leave for higher pay and better conditions elsewhere.
Ça fatigue énormément, c'est une pression mentale, un stress supplémentaire, beaucoup de temps supplémentaire. Donc c'est sûr que ça nous affecte aussi au niveau de la patrouille, là, que le sous-financement, puis on ne peut pas être payé non plus cher. On dépend des paliers de gouvernement pour avoir de l'argent.
A recent federal report demonstrates that Wemotaci is not the only police force to be undermanned. First Nations police forces across Canada say many problems are due to a funding model that, quote, is inadequate to support First Nations police services, end quote. The report recommends that, quote, a federal legislation which recognizes First Nations police services as essential services is required to improve retention of officers with better salaries and benefits. Following the release of the report, the federal government committed to introducing legislation to make First Nations police services an essential service. Marianne Petitquet is Wemotaci's newest recruit. The 21-year-old woman has been patrolling since this summer.
Avant même d'aller au collège, j'avais demandé une promesse d'embauche au directeur de police de Wemont.
Petitquet speaks the Atikamekw language, which enables her to create a bond of trust in her interventions.
Je me vois pas trop non plus travailler à l'extérieur parce que j'ai déjà une grosse approche aussi au niveau de la communauté ici à Wemont parce que c'est un endroit où j'ai toujours vécu puis je me sens déjà bien en étant ici.
Petitquet is exactly the kind of officer Wemotaci needs here. The hope is they'll be able to keep her by one day paying her a competitive salary. A story by Shushan Bacon, APTN National News, Wemotaci First Nation, Quebec.
All right, time to step aside for one more break, but still ahead, Vancouver's Indigenous Fashion Week has kicked off.
And it's exciting. There's so many great designers now. You know, 30 years ago there wasn't as many. So now we're seeing a resurgence and a lot of the artwork of many nations.
Welcome back. It's time now for our photo of the day. Arlene sent in this photo of a tree outside her home. She has placed 215 orange ribbons on her tree, along with a banner to remember those that did not make it home. Thanks so much, Arlene, for the picture. Your photos can be emailed to us by using share@aptn.ca, and your photo might be our next photo of the day. All right, now let's take a look at tomorrow's weather forecast. We start over in the east, 6 degrees in St. John's and +1 in Charlottetown. 3 degrees in Cartwright and 5 in Happy Valley Goose Bay. 0 degrees and some snow in Quebec City and +1 in Val-d'Or. 2 degrees in Toronto with snow and -1 in North Bay. -5 and snow in Timmins and -16 in Big Trout Lake. -26 in Churchill and -25 in snow in Thompson. -11 in Barons River and -8 in Winnipeg. -10 in Regina and -24 in Saskatoon. minus 22 in Buffalo Narrows, and minus 30 in Stony Rapids. Moving a bit west now, minus 23 in Fort Chippewa and minus 26 in Clear and Grande Prairie. Minus 20 in Edmonton and snow and minus 21 in Calgary. Minus 3 in Clear and Campbell River and minus 19 in Quesnel. Minus 5 in Prince Rupert and minus 23 in Fort Nelson. Minus 17 in Whitehorse and minus 19 in Rock River. Minus 22 in Norman Wells and minus 27 in Fort Simpson. Minus 15 in Nunavik and minus 18 in Colville Lake. Minus 32 in Baker Lake and minus 29 in Chesterfield. Minus 25 in Arctic Bay and clear and minus 30 in Clyde River. The annual Vancouver Indigenous Fashion Week kicked off in Vancouver, and as APTN's Tina House reports, it was a stellar lineup.
For the third year, Vancouver Indigenous Fashion Week kicked off with an incredible showcase of dancers floating down the runway in front of a sold-out crowd. This year's event features 32 designers from across the country, and backstage we caught up with Jolene Miskinak, who created the event.
Who are you wearing tonight?
I'm wearing Leslie Hampton. This dress was worn in 2019, and she was here for that, and now she's here still in this dress, and yeah, just really excited to show it off.
And symbolizing MMAWG?
Yes.
Amazing. Anything else you want to say?
Oh God, I'm so nervous. I'm just really happy. I'm just really happy that I have a really good team, and you know, I have my teammates. One of my teammates is on the floor. You can't see her, and I have a teammate behind you. So, just feeling very supported.
The first to kick off VIFW was Gitsan designer Yolanda Skelton. Hemiculus Baker is also the co-creator of Vancouver Indigenous Fashion Week, along with being a veteran fashion designer herself.
And you know, it's a big show. It's like four days. Yeah, 4 days. And it's exciting. There's so many great designers now. You know, 30 years ago there wasn't as many. So now we're seeing a resurgence and a lot of the artwork of many nations.
And over the next 4 days, here at the Queen Elizabeth Theatre in downtown Vancouver, some of the best Indigenous designers will be showcasing their collections, with all Indigenous models walking the runway. And tonight, it's all about raising awareness for those that are missing or have been murdered, with the theme Red Dress Night. Butterflies in Spirit and members of the Crazy Indian Brotherhood showcased photos of loved ones who have been murdered or have gone missing.
I wish I didn't have to do this anymore. This issue is still here. If anything, it might be worse. Nothing's changing. So raising awareness of this issue through this kind of platform is amazing, because it reaches audiences that won't really know or care about the issue.
Thank you. We need to do everything we can to raise awareness about violence against Indigenous women, whatever it takes to do everything we can to create change, create safety in our communities.
Vancouver Indigenous Fashion Week goes until December the 2nd. Tina House, APTN National News, Vancouver.
The first ever driver's ed school by and for Anishinaabe is now open for residents of the Abitibi region in western Quebec. The Council of the First Nation of Abitibi-Winni and of the Anishinaabe Nation of Lac-Simon announced the opening of the Otapan Driving School. It's a partnership with the region's Adult Education Center. The first group of students started their lessons November the 30th in Picogan. The second will start next February at Lac-Simon. The councils say this school will help address an absence of driver's ed in the region, while providing a culturally sensitive program.
C'est vraiment vers l'autonomie, un pas de plus pour notre nation, notre communauté. Puis je suis contente encore une fois d'être en partenariat avec notre communauté sœur.
A young First Nation artist from the Yukon is behind one of Purelator's limited edition Christmas boxes. 18-year-old Lara Bode is a Little Sam and Carmack's First Nation citizen. She's one of 13 artists selected for Purelator's third annual holiday art boxes. This year's theme is Gathering for a Meal, which inspired Bode to design an image of her and her mother baking cookies. Animals found in the Yukon can also be seen throughout the design. Bode is a first-year art student at Vancouver's Emily Carr University and says it's great to have her work showcased across Canada.
As a First Nation artist, my influences are always going to be from those roots, no matter what I do, even if it's not like what would be considered in the general public as First Nations art. It will always have those influences, so it's nice to know that those Yukon Indigenous influences are also being shipped across Canada.
Today's episode of APTN In Focus looked at the importance of Indigenous women in leadership positions, from female chiefs to a national leader and women who want to take on leadership. Here's a look at some of today's segment. Why is it important a woman is leading the AMC after so many years of men leading the helm, so to speak?
We speak as women, we speak from the heart, we speak on the fact that we are the life givers for our children, and that we be able to put in place a journey for our children. So it can be a little bit better than our journey at the present time.
One of the challenges, obviously, that I face as a young Métis leader is ageism and misogyny. Still, wherever I go, there's always going to be individuals in a room who, who don't take me as seriously until I bring the voice of our communities to that table and show individuals that we deserve to be here as women leaders, as young women leaders. You really have to earn that respect in a way that I think men maybe don't have to work as hard for.
As women have always played an important role traditionally in our society, and it was when Europeans' contact happened that they were essentially taken taken out of that role and supplanted by men. And this was European influence. And what happened in many communities was that the acceptance of those outside rules in our community meant that women were officially taken out of those positions.
What do you hope happens for the future?
I hope to see more changes in the system. The system is set up to fail us. And the more I see women out there doing some pretty fantastic things, it can only change and transform, and we can shape it into something that works and for the next generation.
All right, that's all we have for you tonight on APTN National News. If you missed any of our stories and want to catch up, you can do so on our website, aptnnews.ca. I'm Daryl Stranger. For all of us here, thank you for joining us, Miigwech, and have a great night.